So good morning, everyone. As previously mentioned, I'm Danielle Jones. I'm the Senior Air Quality Specialist for the Asbestos NESHAP program here in air quality. And so today I'm going to be talking about GovOnline, our new awesome online electronic system for submitting asbestos NESHAP notifications. Hopefully at the end of all of this, you'll find that it eliminates the need for the 6 pages of notification forms that you saw in Masika and Mary's presentation. So this is kind of going to be a replacement for that if you choose to use it. So hopefully you'll find that there's an incentive to use it. So before we dive into the system, I wanted you guys to explain some common questions that we get from contractors related to our asbestos NESHAP program. One of the big questions that we get from contractors is, can we just email our notification to you? And the other question is, what's the soonest that I could start on my renovation or demolition? And those two questions are usually related. You want to email it because you want to start as soon as possible, right? So the reality is there's no way around the required 10 working day notice, which Lexan kind of touched on earlier during her presentation. But what we try to do is we listen to the feedback that we got from contractors, and we have this new online system. So we hope that you find, with the logic that we've incorporated into the system, that it's an easier way for you to identify what you have to submit when you're submitting a notification, and in turn that'll help us to process it hopefully more quickly. So before we look at the system, just some common issues that I want you guys to think about that we encounter when we're doing our review of the notifications that are submitted. One of the big things is the asbestos survey. Sometimes we find that it's not included with the notification that we received. And so the asbestos NESHAP regulation requires for there to be a thorough inspection before any regulated work starts. So the survey is our way of verifying that an inspection occurred. And it also helps us to determine what requirements from the NESHAP regulation applies. So if we don't miss it, it kind of takes away a huge chunk of us being able to determine whether or not you're in compliance. So that's one of the things that we see. Another issue that we've seen in the past is the incomplete notification forms. So sometimes when we actually get the notification form, it's not completely filled out. And while it might seem like we're asking for a bunch of information just to be bothersome, that's not the case. Everything that we're asking for actually comes from the asbestos NESHAP regulation. So if you're leaving out information, we can't really approve it because it's not necessarily in compliance. So if you've heard from us about, hey, what's going to be your work practices or who's the owner, that's because we're trying to make sure that you're in compliance with the NESHAP regulation. So that's one of the things that we see as well. And then the last thing is start dates, issues with the start dates. So once again, the asbestos NESHAP regulation requires a 10 working day notice before any regulated work starts. And so sometimes we'll see a start date that's actually too soon. And so a lot of times we'll have to call or email to try to get that start date pushed back to the earliest possible start date, which would be 10 working days from when it was postmarked or submitted. So those are some common issues that we see when we're doing our review and processing the notifications so that we can approve them. So we thought about the feedback we got from contractors as well as some of the issues we see when we're doing our review, and we incorporated that into the logic that went into our new GovOnline system and try to avoid some of those issues from coming up. So the end result, which Lexan touched on earlier, is GovOnline, which is the first EPA-approved asbestos NESHAP online submittal system in the Southeast. So I think that's a pretty big accomplishment, as Lexan mentioned before. It's available for you to start using today, so hopefully you'll race out of here and get on it. You'll be eager to use it. You can access it from our asbestos NESHAP page on our website, and we're actually going to look at it in just a second as well. But I think you'll find it is a pretty cool tool. You can, when you create your account, you can sign up for text alerts. So if you want to get the confirmation that comes when you first submit your notification, you can actually sign up for that to come to your phone. You can even work on a submittal from your phone. I actually did one earlier this morning, just scrolling through it and reviewing the system. So I think you guys will find that it's a pretty useful tool to have in your toolbox as far as when you're doing demolitions or renovations and being able to submit these online versus by paper. So let's look at it. So this is what the home screen will look like when you go to the website. For this workshop, I'm using the test site. So if you see the UAT at the top, that's why. This is actually the test site, but it's pretty much identical to what you guys will see when you go to the live site. So When you first get to the home page, if you've never used the system, which I don't think any of you guys have, unless you just randomly did one this morning before the workshop, the first thing that you have to do is create a new account. And so you do that, there's a link right here to set up your new account. And there's also a system user guide, which is also on our website. I think you'll find that this is going to be your best friend when you're trying to become familiar with how to use GovOnline and setting up your account. It literally goes step by step with what you need to do to get your account set up. There's screenshots and everything to kind of walk you through that process. So once you have all that done and you get your temporary password, you'll be ready to log in. And I'm going to log in here. I have to remember my password. Which, if that happens to you, there is an option for you to find it. I have 1 million passwords, so sometimes that happens. So once you log into the system, the first thing that you'll see is the dashboard. This is kind of going to be your starting point for using the system. A lot of the functions that you'll find useful in the system you can actually do from this dashboard. So if you wanted to start a new notification form, you could do that by going to Start New Submittal and just choosing the Asbestos NESHAP notification. If you have previously started on a notification and you did not finish it, it'll show up here under My Unfinished Submittals. So if you were working on an Asbestos NESHAP notification and you're wondering why we don't have it or why you haven't heard anything else from us about it and it's showing up here, that's why. Because if it's showing up here, we don't have it on our end. So for today's example, I'm actually going to click on this one in just a second, and we'll start from there for going through an example notification. And then the only other thing from this dashboard that you can see is the message center. Excuse me. And so that basically is just a way for you to go quickly to any automatic system emails that were sent related to notifications that you've submitted for your account. So once again, a lot of what you'll be doing, you literally can do it from the start page. So here's an example form that I'm going to walk you guys through, just to show you how the system works. It literally is everything we were asking you for in the paper form, so it's not much of a change in terms of what we're asking you for. It just might look slightly different because it's online versus being a paper copy now. But it's literally the same information. So the first thing is this big yellow box. It's yellow for a reason, and it has important for a reason because we want you to start by reading that. It has some helpful information in there for you guys about the NESHAP program and just things that you'll need to keep in mind as you're doing your notification form. And then it also has, if you have questions, our contact information, and there's instructions that you can open from here. That's similar to the paper instructions, but it's been tweaked to be specific to this new online form. So if you have questions about what data you need to be entering into each of these fields, just know that you can access these instructions from within the notification form itself. Then the next part is the applicant information. So this literally is going to pull the information for the account that you're logged into. So whoever's logged in, it pre-fills that information in the applicant information section. If for some reason the person that is submitting the notification is different or there's different information that needs to be updated, please do so, especially the email, because that is the email that your confirmation will come to once you hit the submit button. So if you need to update any information, you can do that from within here. And all of the required fields are actually marked with a red asterisk just to kind of make sure that you're aware of the minimum things that you need to include when you're doing the notification form. Section 1 is where you're going to provide all of the information about the facility that is being renovated or demolished. So once again, at minimum, you need to fill in the fields that are marked with the red asterisk. I would say if you have more of the information that's asked for, if you have it, just go ahead and fill it in because it'll help us. The more information we have, the easier it is for us to actually process the notification. And I forgot to say this a second ago, but you guys actually should have a hard copy of this example in your handouts. So just if you want to follow along, just kind of keep that in mind. So you go through, you put the information. So if we were demolishing this building, put the building name, the address, a parcel number, the building size. And then for section 2 is where you specify the type of notification that you're submitting for. So original or courtesy are your two options. Courtesy is basically if you know that it's not subject to the asbestos NESHAP regulation, but you want to let us know about it just as a courtesy, you can do that. We are more than willing to accept those, and you would hit courtesy, but I think the vast majority of you guys are going to be hitting original for the type of notification more often than not. And then the type of operation, this is kind of important, and I'll explain why in just a second. So this is where you tell us whether you're notifying us for a demolition, an order demolition, a move off, renovation, emergency renovation, or intentional burn. For this example, we're going to be looking at a demolition and a renovation. And the reason why this is important, I'll show you here. If you notice when you click on it, there's that little spin, the wheel spinning, if you will. So that actually updates the form and the required sections. So by checking the appropriate operation, that's going to help us, it helps the form to update to show what fields you have to fill out at a minimum. So make sure that you choose the correct type of operation. And then the building owner, that's one of those items that I mentioned before. Sometimes it's left off from the paper notifications we've seen in the past. Sometimes the building owner contact information is not fully provided, so now it's required, so you can't submit it without actually filling out the minimum items that we need, which once again is going to be helpful because we won't have to come back on the back end and ask you for that information because you'll already have provided it. So you provide the name of the person, their email address, and their physical address, as well as a contact person. And then if there's going to be a renovation, as there is in this example, you would fill out the asbestos removal contractor information. If it's not a regulated removal, so if you're doing an asbestos removal that is not regulated, I would just say if you have the information available, go ahead and provide it, because sometimes you might think it's not regulated, but it actually is. So if you have it, I would just say for a renovation, go ahead and fill it out, and we'll determine during our review whether or not it truly is regulated or not. For demolition contractor, similar to the asbestos removal contractor, you provide the contact information for who's doing the work. I really like this feature because I'm all about saving time and not having to do unnecessary steps. So if the asbestos removal contractor and the demolition contractors are the same, you can simply check this box and it'll pre-fill that information in so you don't have to type it twice, unless you just really want to, right? The general contractor or other contractors or operators is optional. If you have that information available and you want to provide it, you can fill in that section. And it's similar to the demo. You can check same as 3C. If that information is going to be the same, it'll pre-populate those fields for you. For section 4, that's where you're going to be explaining whether or not there's asbestos present in the structure, which is a requirement for NESHAP. So it asks you if asbestos is present, and then if so, it asks you for the inspector's name and accreditation number, the North Carolina Asbestos Accreditation Number, and you'll hear more about that later with Don when he gets up and does his presentation for the state. He'll talk about the state requirements for a licensed inspector. Excuse me. And then for 4B is where you tell us exactly how you determine whether or not there was asbestos present. So basically with this part of it, if you choose sample and test, it's going to ask you to submit an asbestos survey. So you can see it says that here you are required to submit the related asbestos survey with this notification. If you were to choose visual inspection, you can't just say I did a visual inspection, I didn't see anything. You have to actually explain to us what the process was for determining that there was no asbestos present by just a visual inspection. So you have to explain that so that we can verify whether or not you're in compliance. And then you could always presume that a suspect material does contain asbestos, and if so, you would just choose the presumed ACM. For this example, we're going to do sample and test. Any questions so far? And then for the asbestos-containing material, so this is similar to the paper notification form that you've seen in the past where you list out the materials that were identified to contain asbestos in the survey, or by visual inspection. And so there's this whole little note here to kind of clarify what exactly we're looking for in this section. So you should be describing the material that's going to be removed, the quantity and the unit. And that's kind of important because some of the things that we see with the material and the quantities, sometimes we'll see, like, for example, it might say 16 windows, and we don't know what what's the square footage for the material that you're removing, if it's 16 windows or 5 sinks or whatever it might be. So make sure that you're using the units that are listed here. So you have square feet, linear feet. The EPA has approved for linear feet to be used if you're quantifying materials that are on pipes. If it's not on pipes, then you shouldn't be using linear feet. And then cubic feet for a material that is in a pile. So those are the different units that you could specify. And that's basically what this box is explaining. You should tell us whether or not how the material is classified. So is it friable? Is it category 1 non-friable or category 2 non-friable? And then for activity, that's where you tell us if it's going to be removed or whether or not it will remain in place. Yes, sir.
The linear feet, if it's not on pipes, we shouldn't be using it. The 25 window example you just gave, will we not use linear feet for the window caulking or that kind of thing?
You're supposed to be using square feet. So even if it's a 1 by 2, like you're supposed to be using square feet. We see that a lot, but it should be in square footage. We'll do a rough estimation if we don't have it in square footage, but a lot of times our estimation is going to be much higher than if you had just measured it yourself. So I would say if you can and you're able to, go ahead and measure it and try to give it to us in square feet. Yeah. Yes.
The window, the glazing or the caulking? Mm-hmm. Talking about a glazing or you're talking about a caulking?
Oh, I'm talking about both of them.
Both of them.
So both window glazing and window caulking. So if it's not a material, the EPA has a determination out where they have determined if for pipes you can measure that in linear feet. That's the only determination the EPA has made that says that linear feet can be used for like quantifying asbestos-containing materials. So if it's window glazing or caulking, you should be using square feet. If the windows have been removed intact and it's in a pile for some reason, then perhaps you could use cubic feet, but yeah.
So, there's a lot of calculations involved in using square footage on a window.
I know, yes. Which is why you don't want us to calculate it, because ours is going to be probably higher than if you just went ahead and did it.
Yeah, because if you're looking at a window glazing that is 2 inches in width and the length for that whole window, what do you call it? The seal around that is about maybe 8 inches. Calculate that square footage. In the inches, converting it into square inches, square foot, and then you keep going. So windows, just giving the number of windows makes more sense than square footage.
Lexon, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
We completely understand. It would be great if, you could just tell us windows or do it in linear feet. We're just letting you know that whenever we get those in, we convert it to square feet in some kind of way. We have to come up because the EPA requires us to quantify that by square feet. So based on what you gave us, we're going to come up with something. It's something in square feet. So it would probably be more accurate if you came up with something in square feet. You are also welcome to estimate as much as you want. I mean, you don't have to be like, well, this was 1 3/4 of an inch, and this was, a 1/2 inch. I mean, we're good with rounding. Know that we will be rounding when you get it to us.
Alrighty. Oh, I was going to, so like for this one, ceiling tiles is what's listed here. If I wanted to add another material on, you just click that add material button and then you can actually fill in the table. So initially you can't just start typing in the table. You have to hit the add material button for you to input the materials itself. So, and if you need to delete it, as I'm going to do here, you can. For the schedule dates for work, so this is where we get into the whole 10 working day notice for any work that's regulated under the Asbestos NESHAP regulation. So you're going to give us the start dates. You should give us the start dates and the end dates for the asbestos removal if that applies. Once again, with asbestos removal, it may or may not be regulated. So we tried to allow for some flexibility some flexibility there because you might be notifying us about an asbestos removal that is not regulated. So we didn't want to lock down the dates and not allow you to pick a date if it's not regulated. So for example, if say you did some category 1 non-friable flooring material and it's already been removed before you give us the notification for the demolition, and you just wanted to go ahead and list, hey, it was removed back in January, we want to allow you the flexibility to do that. So with the asbestos removal, there's a little bit more flexibility with picking the dates. But no, if we look at the notification and we see that it is a regulated removal, we're going to contact you about the dates if they're off in terms of if the removal start date is too soon or something like that. Demolition, since the demolitions are regulated and you're required to do the 10 working day notice, you'll notice that you cannot pick a date that is before the 10 working days is up for demolitions. So if I was submitting this today, the earliest start date would be April the 6th. So just kind of keep that in mind. So if you are notifying us for an emergency renovation, which the regulation specifically speaks to what would qualify as an emergency renovation, there is an option here to select that. And if there's an ordered demolition, same thing, you can specify that there's an ordered demolition, and there are sections that you have to fill out for that. Yeah. For demo? Yeah, I think, so we're gonna look at that in just a second. But you have to put like the dates of the order and so forth. So we'll look at that in just a second. And if for some reason, like the demolition, like they're still similar to what you would do now. If for some reason something changes or you need to change your dates, as long as you're not trying to move it up before the 10 working day notice, if you're not meeting the criteria that would allow you to do that, like right now, you would just send us an email or call us and say, hey, I need to push back the start date. Or, hey, you know, if you've given us a 10 working day notice, or if you've given us more than a 10 working day notice and you wanted to try to push it back to a date that is like, let's say I had listed my start date here for April the 10th. And the earliest start date was actually April the 6th, and you wanted to see if you could push it back. Same thing that would happen now. You would just contact us, and we'll talk to you and figure that out.
And I just wanted to mention, whenever y'all tell us something, we will go in and actually update this online notification so you can see the updated version. You know, again, you can log into your account and always see that information, but it also retains the original copy so you can see what was originally submitted as well.
So if we need to move a demo date out into the future a little bit,
Yep.
still email you.
Yep. And I would just go
No,
in. You could if you really wanted to, but it's perfectly fine for you to do what you would do now and just email me or whoever's assigned to the notification, and we would just go in like Lexon said and update it on the form, and it would keep the history, so it would show what the original was and what we've updated it to. For work practices and procedures, so that's where you need to specify how you're going to do the asbestos removal if that applies, what methods you're going to be removing any asbestos-containing materials by, and as well as for demolition, what demolition work practices and procedures you're going to be using to do the demolition. So you would just check the applicable boxes in this section. And then for 7B, this used to be one of the ones that was commonly, it's like it used to be 3 separate check boxes, and we combined it all into one, and now it's required, you're required to check off on it before you can submit it. So basically, it's you saying that you're going to adhere to the required work practices that are specified in the asbestos NESHAP regulation. So you're going to use water for any regulated asbestos-containing materials. There won't be any visible emissions, and that if you find additional suspect materials, you'll stop work and notify us immediately. So you want to make sure you read that statement carefully, and then you check off that box. And this is what I was talking about earlier in relation to the question about ordered demolitions or emergency renovations. So if you had selected that type of operation, this would show up as a required field, and you would have to fill out this information if it was an ordered demolition or if it was an emergency renovation. For this example, that doesn't apply, so we're not going to do it for this example, but if you chose ordered demolition or emergency renovation, you would have to fill out that information. And for ordered demolitions, you have to provide a copy of the order. Then for asbestos removal, if it's a regulated asbestos removal, you would complete Section 10 and provide the asbestos waste transporter and waste disposal site information. So once again, it's pretty much literally the same exact information you were providing on the hard form, but now there's logic built into this online system that allows for us to go ahead and identify at minimum what you need to be providing us with, and then it updates depending on what selections you make. So once you're done with filling out all of the information, you'll see there's a certification statement. So the steps that you go through when you're creating your account, as well as the certification statements that are within the form, is what allows us to accept these online. So this is what replaces the wet signature. You completing these certifications and then the steps you go through when you're setting up your account. So you will read the statement basically saying that you, the information you provided is correct. You understand the asbestos NESHAP regulation and that you'll have someone on site that's trained in those provisions. And then you check off that box. One thing I wanted to point out is that as you're working on the form, if you know for some reason you're going to have to stop, say you get a phone call and you have to go address something immediately, you can hit the save button and then you can come back to wherever you left off if you hit that button. We're going to hit next though. So the next page is the attachments page. And so this is where you'll see any required documents that you have to submit with your notification. So if you recall, I said if I select sample and test, I have to provide the asbestos survey. So as you can see here, I selected sample and test, so it's telling me that I have to include that attachment with my notification. And so you can submit it online with this form. You just choose online and then you hit the upload button. It's similar to other documents you probably have uploaded for like emails where you hit the button and you have to find the file on your computer and then you hit save to attach it. So I've already attached an example one here just so you can see what it will look like. We still will allow you guys, if you want to, you can still submit it by mail, like your survey or any required documents by mail, hand delivery, or good old fax. You would just select other for that. And then you have to tell us how you're going to be submitting it, so we'll know what to look for basically. The thing about this is that keep in mind, if you do not submit it online with your notification, the system is going to mark it as a partial submittal. So your notification is not complete until we get that documentation. So if for some reason there's a huge delay in you submitting a required survey or other documentation, that could potentially delay your start date. So if you have it available and it's easy for you to attach, I would say just go ahead and submit it online, but just know that there are other options for you to submit it. So we're going to choose online. If you have any other documents that you want to include, you can attach them here. And then you get this summary page. And so if you wanted to go back and review the notification or your attachments, you can do so from this page. Once you're good with everything that you've uploaded up until or submitted up until this point, you hit the next button. Once again, there's this big yellow box basically saying, hey, there might be some other requirements. Here are the other agencies that you might need to contact. And also explaining that you have to do the certification of submission. So once you read the certification statement saying that the documents and statements that you provided based off of the information and belief you have formed after reasonable inquiry are true, accurate, and complete, once you agree to that, you answer these questions based off of your whatever you entered when you set up your account. So shouldn't be the same as mine. And then there's some information about a payment. Basically, it's just telling you that if you're notifying us just for a regulated removal, you submit your NESHAP fee payment directly to us, and you'll get a link in your email with that information. And if it's for a demolition, you submit your payment through code enforcement. That's all that's explaining for the payment information. So once you're good to go, you can hit submit. Might have to wait a second for the system to load. And then you get this confirmation. So once you get that confirmation, that means we've received it. One of our admins will review it, and it'll get assigned to either Yvonne or myself from there. So this is kind of important. If you want to keep it for tracking purposes, you can print it off. And it also basically explains that you will get an email. And that email is also going to be important because it contains this information about the submittal information that you've provided. And then you'll actually have a PDF attachment in that email that you get that has the PDF form. So it'll look like the old NESHAP notification form that you would have submitted a hard copy of, but it'll have all the information you provided in this online form pre-filled in. So that'll be for your records that you'll have that information available.
What happens if somebody forgot to job and then decided to come back and call you and say, hey, I messed up?
Hypothetically speaking. Well, that would be a violation of the asbestos NESHAP regulation as it is now. So we would basically go investigate it and get more information about exactly what happened. Verify that whatever was demolished was truly subject to the asbestos NESHAP regulation. We'll find out whether or not an inspection was done. And from there, my supervisor and I will talk about it and decide how to proceed from there. But if you fail to notify for a regulated removal or for a demolition of a structure or facility that was subject to the NESHAP, that's a violation of the asbestos NESHAP regulation. Potentially, you could receive a notice of violation, but it depends on the situation in terms of how we decide that.
Whether or not you get a penalty depends on how egregious the violation is and how many times you've done this already.
But surely, since all of you guys are in here, this means that you're like on top of your stuff, right? And that would never happen, right? So know that you'll have an email coming your way. Only other thing I want to show you guys is once you are done submitting your notifications, you can go back to the submittal list. If you were logged into your dashboard, you can also get to this by just hitting the submittal tab. And you can actually track the notifications that you have submitted. So there's like an archive of it. So in the past, you would submit as a paper notification, you would get an approval email, but beyond that, unless you were just really awesome with your record keeping, you wouldn't necessarily have a record of all the notifications that you've submitted to us. So the really cool thing about the system is that you can log in and see everything you've submitted to us. And you can also see the status. So where is it at in terms of our review? If it says admin review, that means one of our admins is in the process of reviewing it. If it says technical review, that means either Yvonne or I are in the process of reviewing it. So it kind of updates you in terms of where you're at with a specific notification. She's going to bring it up.
I'm on your page right now, and I don't see any way to get to this application. Can you tell me the easiest way to access this thing?
So if you go to, let's go back to this website.
So you're on code enforcement's page. So it's not on code enforcement's page, it's on MCAC's web page. If you go to airquality.charmec.org/asbestos. Now, maybe code enforcement will want to add a link to this to their page, huh? What a good idea you helped us with.
Any other questions? So the payment is pretty much the same. The payment system is the same. So you can go to our website, actually. If you're submitting, if it's 3 feet, I'm sorry. I'm just going to go to our website. I think there's a link. So if you're paying through if it's a demo permit, you would pay that through code enforcement, similar to what Masika was talking about earlier. But you're just making a payment for a regulated removal, there you go. Sorry, my glasses are not working as well as they should. So you would just go to the online payment system, or you can still submit payment by check. But there is an online option for you to make your payment, which is what happens now. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
About if you're doing a revision to your notification. Have anything like that online yet?
So if you're using the GovOnline system, you can go in and revise the notification on your end. So going back to what I was showing you guys before, you can go back and view your. I'll just look at the one that I just did. So you can do a revision here from your end, or if you wanted to email it to us, say, like I said before, you want to push back your start date, or if you find additional suspect materials, for any change, we're going to ask you to send us something in writing. So you can send it by email, and then we can go in and update it on our end, and it'll keep the archival history. So either way, they could do it from their end, or we could do it. But this system does allow for revisions.
The other question I have, is there a maximum upload for the survey? Like, is there maximum size? Those things, especially with colored pictures, can get pretty lengthy.
There was, I think it was like 10 megabytes. I think we, with our developer, we sized it where we thought it could handle those surveys and block pictures. There is a limitation, but I think we've set it to where it allows.
And I think we actually, when we were testing it, we took some very large surveys and tested it out to see if it accepted it.
And we actually have the ability to alter that as well. So if it's become a problem, or even if you just have something and let us know, we can increase that file size within the settings of the system.
So just one more time for clarification on paying. So is it, in the past, has this not debited right out of our account?
Yeah, so like what if Danielle was saying is that normally if it's handled through your demolition permit, then that's going to continue to happen with code enforcement. It's just if you're doing a regulated renovation, then that you're not going through code enforcement necessarily if there's no demolition involved. And so in those situations, you just pay us directly, so you can use that link Danielle showed.